Well, another big development today in the Scott Peterson case. A judge in San Mateo said that Peterson must be resentenced in the 2002 death of his pregnant wife. For more now, we're joined this afternoon by KTVU legal analyst Michael Cardoza. Michael, this is just the latest development since the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence last year, citing significant errors in jury selection. Walk us through the outcome of today's hearing.
Well, today's hearing simply is to get Scott Peterson, or the upcoming hearing, to get Scott Peterson off death row. He's on death row now because he was sentenced to death. So he spends his time on death row. Now he will come back at some point at the behest of the district attorney, be resentenced to life without possibility of parole. That will put him in the general population. The defense is saying, no, don't do that right now. Let's wait until we have our hearing about whether there was juror misconduct in this case.
Okay, so there are really kind of two avenues here, Michael. First, you have this, resentencing. This is no longer a death penalty case, as you just explained. But there is also this question about, whether Scott Peterson should be granted an entirely new trial. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, you have the infamous juror number 7, Rochelle Neese, who was the one that was very vociferous after the trial, saying very negative things about Scott Peterson after they got back the verdict. The claim of the defense is that she lied during jury selection and saying, I've never been in a lawsuit, I've never been involved in a crime. When in fact, according to some of the evidence, she did get a temporary restraining order against a woman for following her. That was her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend. So she got a restraining order, and then she was involved apparently in a domestic violence case that was never reported, but she was apparently the victim of that by a police report in another case. So the defense is saying, look, she lied to get on this jury. She should have told us about that. Scott Peterson is entitled to the individual opinion of each juror. He did not get that. She was obviously, in the defense's opinion, biased and was lying in wait to get Scott Peterson for killing an unborn baby.
Yeah, that is obviously the significant errors in jury selection that I mentioned at the first of this segment. Okay, let's move on now to another high-profile case here in California, and that is the murder case of Cal Poly student Kristen Smart. A San Luis Obispo judge ruling that both Paul Flores and his father will, in fact, now stand trial for the 1996 disappearance of Smart. Just for the audience, I want to remind them that Paul Flores is charged with murder. Ruben Flores is accused of helping to hide her body. The judge, Michael, said that he found the evidence presented during the preliminary hearing convincing. So we're going to trial here.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But when a judge says, I'm going to hold these two defendants to answer, doesn't mean really a whole lot other than the judge says, look, I am finding a reasonable suspicion, not
we seem to be having some trouble with Michael Cardoza's audio, but I will tell you that hearing there in San Luis Obispo lasted about a month and a half. 36 prosecution witnesses called. The defense did not call any witnesses. I also want to remind the audience that Smart's body, Michael, has never been found. I believe that we have reconnected with you. Talk a little bit, Michael, about what type of challenge that poses in a case like this. Again, Kristen Smart's remains never been found.
Well, true, but there have been, hundreds of cases in the United States where they've tried murder cases without a body. That means they're relying on circumstantial evidence, evidence from which inferences have to be drawn, and forensic evidence. In this case, they better have a lot of that circumstantial evidence and a lot of forensic evidence to point to the defendant in this case. Now, keep in mind, Heather, one of the big issues in the case and one of the big fights will be the past history of Paul, because he apparently had a reputation for being very aggressive sexually when he was down at Cal Poly. And there are a lot of apparent victims So the district attorney's office wants to get those into evidence, so you can be sure that there's going to be a big fight about that, because if a jury here's a guy that sexually is very aggressive with women, what's to say he didn't in this case with Ms. Smart? So that will be a big issue in this case. The fact that the body was not found, to me, doesn't mean that much if they have enough evidence circumstantially and scientifically to tie him into this. Because the jury's not going to say, gee, you were smart enough to get rid of the body so law enforcement couldn't find it. Yeah, but we got all this evidence to show that you did it. So I'm not worried about the no body in this particular case.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the witnesses that we're expected to see at the trial during this preliminary hearing, Michael. One of Paul Flores's former girlfriends did, in fact, testify, along with several investigators, those who help with cadaver dogs. I mean, as I mentioned, there were a lot of witnesses. The defense, though, did not call any. Is that routine in a case like this, in a preliminary hearing like this?
Absolutely. I mean, let me make an analogy. It's like you and I playing cards. I tell you, the government, you're the government, show me your card. You show me your cards via the vehicle of preliminary hearing. You, the government, can ask me, now show me your cards, defense. Show me what you've got. No, it's not unusual. The defense hardly, I mean, in 1% of preliminary hearing might put evidence on, because they know the burden of proof is so low. The reasonable suspicion, probable cause, that's like, did you get arrested? That's enough to hold you to answer to go to trial. So that burden of proof is very low at the PX preliminary hearing. They're not going to put any evidence on and allow the government to cross-examine their witnesses. They're going to save them for trial. That doesn't mean anything to me. It's a smart move, actually.
All right, Michael. Well, the judge, as I mentioned, said he has a strong suspicion that Smart was, in fact, murdered and buried under Ruben Flores' deck. But he also added, Michael, there's proof, whether there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, well, that is for a jury to decide. All right, Michael, really appreciate you breaking down both of these cases. Thanks so much again for joining us this